The foods that are more shelf stable and cheaper generally are not as nutritious. Again, there's a lot of exceptions to that. But when it comes to like fresh fruits and veggies and things like that, or even just like fresh meats and stuff, those type of things, if you live in a certain area, sometimes they don't even have that option and they're having to get creative, or they're just having to eat whatever's available because it's the only thing available, and maybe that's not the most nourishing and fueling thing. So it is a really, really sad reality.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Sweet Liberation, and I'm super excited to be doing today's episode because we are joined by the lovely Michelle Yates, who is a registered dietitian and is also founder of Yates Nutrition. It's so lovely to have you, Michelle. Such an honor.
Thanks for having me. Yes, I
Yeah.
love this international connection. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's great. It's great. We're reaching so many people across the world, and it's such an honor and a pleasure to do that. And to kind of just start conversations, people listening in their kitchens, listening on the go, and just kind of getting people started on these conversations around lifestyle, nutrition, and what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
So, really was excited to talk to you. Tell us a little bit about your journey into your role as a dietitian, what sort of inspired you to that, and kind of the journey towards founding your business, your company, and your mission. So let's just start there.
Yeah. So I started out my whole interest in nutrition, honestly, from a pretty disordered place. I was obsessed with being as thin as possible and as healthy as possible, and, over restricted, over exercised. And as a result of that, I was constantly thinking about food, looking into nutrition, and just thought that it was like the coolest thing ever. I was very, very into it. And so when I found out that in the States, I'm not sure, you guys call it dietitian
Yes,
over
yes,
there, right?
yes, that's right.
So yes, when I found out what a dietitian was, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a job where I could get paid to think about nutrition as much as I do to like know about it. And there was also a part of me too that selfishly wanted to learn what the best diet was, from the powers that be. And so it came from a very disordered place of wanting to continue to control more. And I was, very prideful about my habits and everything. And then as I got into it and got into the field, it became clear pretty quickly that I was making things way too big of a deal. I was hyper obsessing way too much. What I was doing was actually harmful and disordered. And I was like, wow, I actually kind of sound like some of these eating disorders, that I'm reading about. And so that was really eye opening for me. And I had a wonderful community in my education that continued to foster what a healthy relationship with food looks like and with nutrition. And then, of course, just like learning about biology and the nutrition sciences that helped me too with truly understanding like we don't give our bodies enough credit. Usually our bodies are incredible. They can do so much, and we try to micromanage them so much to a point that it's just completely unnecessary. So that was really healing for me. And then, I had always known that I wanted to work in the field of eating disorders. It's funny because hindsight now, I'm like, wow, it's because I related to them. But as I, even after I healed and got to a really healthy place, it just made me want to even more, because it was like, well, now I have to help other people get to this place, because I know people are even worse than I ever was, and they could still deserve to be at a place where food is not on their mind constantly, and they're not struggling with the ramifications of disordered eating, whether that's physical or mental or both. So, yeah, I eventually started working in that field after I became a dietitian. I even went on to do some more education in the field of psychology and mindset, because I just feel like that's such a big piece of the puzzle as well, especially when it comes to disordered eating and emotional eating and all these things, like that's is a huge piece of it. And so I wanted to have like an idea of what was going on there. That way I could blend those two things together. And yeah, it's my business is like I basically my trademark tagline is live nourished and free. And that's really the mission there, is that we want to get to a place where you can feel nourished and healthy and energized and be taking care of yourself, because food is fuel, but food is also fun. And we can have a relationship with food that's free from the unnecessary stress or the binging, the emotional eating, the added pressures that don't need to be there. And it can be easy, and help you with your health goals. So
Amazing.
yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
That's an incredible story, and I can one of the things that I'm picking up on that is this story of food and its relationship with emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know, but I come from a midwifery background, so I watched that inception of that kind of
Mm,
relationship between the mother and the baby, and especially when the
yeah.
mother's able to breastfeed. the,
Yeah.
the the relationship between the milk and the food is actually, milk is everything, and love and connection and skin
Yes.
and bonding,
Comfort.
and it's all of the emotional regulation and all of these deep things that happen from that relationship, and that's our first experience of food. So I wonder, what relationship maybe that plays, that kind of comfort that we are seeking. So you're talking about emotional eating, and what have you
Mhm.
discovered in this journey, around sort of emotional eating habits that people are developing? What do you think is happening?
Yeah, I think, well, you have an amazing point of food does have emotions tied to it, period. Like we can't really run away from that. There's always going to be a sense of this is providing comfort in some way, because maybe it's a cold, rainy day and we have a cup of chili and it's like making us feel a certain type of way. Or somebody brought over a meal and that made you feel loved, or maybe you're having a really crappy day and you just really want some chocolate and that makes you feel a certain type of way too. So there's always going to be this emotional element to food, and that's not a bad thing. Like we don't want to discourage that. We just want to be sure that we're keeping that, I guess, in check, because what can happen is that it becomes a reliance. So we rely on food to numb or escape or try to fix a feeling that we don't like. Like typically when we're talking about emotional eating, we're viewing it more in the sense of like we're eating because we're sad or because we're angry or lonely or anxious or whatever. You can certainly emotionally eat out of like those more positive emotions too, like celebrating a birthday or whatever, but that's usually not
It's a dysregulation,
something.
isn't it? That sort of
Yeah.
dysregulation, that feeling of needing, and it's right in that gut
Yeah.
area.
And wanting to escape, like we're always seeking pleasure. We want to feel better. If we don't feel good, if we feel bad or we don't like what we're feeling, we want to fix that. And so if this connection gets made at some point along the way in your life that food helps you feel better, then that can become something you rely on. And anytime there's a feeling that you don't like and is like distressing for you or uncomfortable for you, we might try to turn to food to escape that feeling. And that can be, I mean, there's so many layers to that, because as
Indeed.
humans, we have so many layers and emotions have so many layers. You can feel a lot of things at the same time. And so it can take some time to dig through all the weeds of what's going on. And that's where that awareness piece is so important. You need to really tune in order to figure out what the heck is going on, because it's just, yeah, you have to.
Yeah, and it's very powerful what you're saying, and I think, as we're kind of uncovering more and more about emotions, just generally as societies, the more advanced we become, the more these things come to the surface, and we kind of need to dig a bit deeper there. Do you see any difference in patterns in the kind of way that men and women approach their food and through their emotions? Is there anything that you're seeing in your expertise?
Yeah, it's a good question. I usually work with women, so they're primarily on the front of my mind. But I think that men certainly can have the same sort of tendencies. They might be coming from a little bit of a different place when it comes to emotional eating. Like men, I think for men, it can be more of a comfort thing. It can be a stress relief thing. And women can do that too, 100%. But women, I do see also eating out of like anxiety and loneliness and feelings of unworthiness. And that isn't as common, I would say, with men. I don't know. There's just different cultural factors that could maybe make women feel that way a little bit more than men, and then feel they need to turn to food. But yeah, I mean, certainly like this can happen no matter what your gender, right? Like everybody can feel all of those things and turn to food. It just seems to be a little bit more common in women.
Yes, yes, indeed, and I think the sort of the way we regulate our emotions can be, different in both genders, and it can be different for many other reasons. So,
Yeah.
so tell us, kind of, in terms of the work that you're doing now. What are the people that are coming to you? What are the main sort of trends of the things that you're seeing? Why are they turning to you? What is the help that they're seeking?
Yeah, they're usually the typical problem that people are coming to me for, women, like I said, because I work with women mostly, is binge eating, and that is like kind of like, just to differentiate, emotional eating or emotional overeating can certainly turn into a binge, but they are different in a way, because binging is when you have an amount of food that is definitely larger than anybody else would have in that same circumstance in about less than 2 hours. That's the typical time frame. It's a short window. And then there's a feeling of loss of control. So with emotional eating, we don't always feel like we're out of control. It's not always this huge amount. It's not always in a short amount of time. So one can definitely lead into the other, but it's a little bit different. Like binging is more severe. And so there's a lot of guilt and shame that gets wrapped up into, well, both of those things, but especially binging, because there's that sense of feeling like, wow, I'm eating way more than I need to, and I feel like I can't control myself. I feel like I'm not my own, or food has control over me. So that's typically where I am stepping in. If you feel out of control, then that's a problem, right? And you shouldn't feel like food has control of you. You should
Yeah.
feel like you're in charge.
My goodness. So they're coming to you really like an SOS situation. It's like a 111 dial, for us to get that sort of support. So
Yeah.
so what are the sort of steps that you're taking to guide, to sort of break those patterns in a way that sort of helps people, and the women that you're working with, sort of sustain that long term?
Yeah. Well, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but such an important element is creating awareness. And that is a skill that we have to foster, and we have to sharpen that tool, because we are so, I think at this point in the day and age, we're very used to just doing the next thing, going on to the next thing. We're multitasking. We're thinking about so many different things at once and doing so many different things at once, as we try to, at least in the US, it's like all about like achieve. And it's madness. And so it's really easy to lose touch with yourself and know what kinds of thoughts you're having, what kinds of things you're feeling. And so that awareness piece is so important. We really have to like clue into that and practice being mindful of what's going on in here and in our heart and in our head. And then from there we can kind of start to like work on everything and start to rewire what needs to be rewired, and from there it's, typically with emotional eating, there's some sort of, when I feel this, I turn to food. So we need to figure out, what are you feeling in the first place? And also, why are you feeling that? Is the why something that we can address? Can we help that feeling not exist in the first place, I guess, or minimize it in some way? And if we can, maybe it's like, because of my job, like my job is really stressful and I'm not just going to quit my job, then we work on, okay, let's manage our perspective of that situation and try to cope with it in healthier ways rather than turning to food. Find other ways that not only help you feel better in the short term, but also make you feel better in the long term, because food will feel better in the short term. It'll make you feel better in the short term for like 5 seconds, but then it doesn't once the guilt sets in and you feel uncomfortable physically. And it's just like, why did I do that? That didn't actually fix the stress that I had with work. So there's this, we need to shift our coping strategy to be more about what's a healthy coping strategy, an adaptive coping strategy that is going to be helpful for you long term as well, and truly help you through those emotions.
Amazing, amazing. And we are seeing so many of our guests, amazing guests we've had, just like you on the show, that are talking about sort of food addiction and you know, these kinds of very difficult to break cycles. So are you also helping people to kind of make choices that start to help and support that transition to a kind of healthier eating model, which is more, you know, harmonious with the
Yeah.
body and the choices that they're making?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I was just talking to somebody else about this, or somebody else today about this. A lot of times when it comes to binging and emotional eating too, it's happening like at the end of the day when we are so tapped out from trying to have all this self-control all day to like restrict. Like we're typically just under eating. And then by the end of the day, our body's like, you need to give me quite a bit more than you have. So we're going to do that now. And I'm going to make you think about food and push you towards food until you finally do give me food. And then the floodgates are open and it's going to be really hard for you to stop, you know? So that is always like, first and foremost, we want to be sure that nutrition wise, you're eating enough, and you're eating enough of the right balance of things. You know, like we can't just be eating protein or just be eating carbs or whatever. Like there needs to be a great balance. You need to have fiber in your diet, healthy fats, proteins, and carbs, giving you all the balance so that your body doesn't get to a place where it feels like it's missing something and then trying to push you to get that thing in. So if we get all of our bases covered there on the nutrition and the diet front, then it helps us to better diagnose and correct anything that's more emotion based and, you know, emotion focused. So yeah, it's so funny because I feel like 80 to 90% of the time, once we fix that nutrition piece, like, hey, let's just be sure you're eating enough. You don't need to like try to live off of 300 calories a day. You know, please don't do that. Then it's like, oh, I don't binge anymore. It's like, shocker, you know, like now your body doesn't have this insane survival instinct kick in at night trying to get you to eat enough so that you can just survive throughout the day.
Exactly, unbelievable. Really, it's a kind of, it's a vicious cycle that people can get themselves into, and I think we've all done it to a certain degree. You know,
Oh yeah,
to a lesser
yeah,
or a greater degree. Maybe it doesn't become a disordered pattern, but we've all been there where, you know, we are just like feeling like we are still in want and need. Actually, you know, you haven't given your body what it needs that day, and it's just saying more. It isn't necessarily
yeah,
saying more calories. It's just saying whatever you've just given me, it's not going to give me all the things I need to do
yeah,
the things I need to do. So that's
yeah.
interesting. And so, are you finding as well with the sort of with the plans that you are putting together for people, that for women, that some of the foods themselves are starting to help the healing process happen and the psychological healing to happen?
I think, yeah, I think it's hard to really nail that down because we'd have to really control, like the only change that's happening is the food and we're not doing any other mindset work or whatever in addition to that. So it's pretty impossible to say if it's just the
Right.
food, but I do think there's an element where when you're starting to incorporate foods that are more nourishing and give you a lot of different vitamins and minerals that maybe you weren't getting before, that can definitely help with cognition and your ability to think through things, and your energy levels and blood sugar stability and all of that. So that definitely, I think, does help quite a bit. And in order to get there, you know, sometimes we have to do some mindset work to get you to a place where it's like, okay, you're doing this because you're caring for your body, not because you're punishing it. Because a lot of times we're used to changing our diet
Yes.
for the sake of trying to change ourselves. And that's because we're unhappy. You know, we want to lose weight or whatever it is. So to make nutrition more about celebration of the body and caring for the body is way more motivating and exciting,
Yeah.
and allowing food to be fun too. Like it doesn't need to be chicken and broccoli and rice every day. Like, please don't. That's a miserable way to live. So
Yeah.
don't do that. Like,
Make it
get the
tasty.
condiments out if you want. Get the other vegetables that you like more, the fruits, like do all the things, have a bunch of variety, and then it becomes more enjoyable. And it's just like
Delicious.
this, yeah, like that cycle that you were talking about. There can be a vicious cycle, and then once you get out of it, it can be another cycle that's actually way more productive, and it just gets
Tasty.
easier and easier and easier to feel better once you start.
Amazing. That's amazing. I mean, as you're talking there, I'm like, I'm inspired to get in my kitchen. I'm thinking, come on, make you some of my delicious soups with all the things in it.
Yes,
I get
it's
really
soup
excited.
season.
I love all that stuff. I get so excited by food. So my emotions are excitement around
Yes.
food.
Yes, and I love that. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that that's a completely normal and human thing to feel, and you can
Yes.
use that to your benefit.
Yes, and unfortunately, I do actually like to feed everybody that comes through my kitchen, so they don't get
We
out.
all love that friend, though. We all love that person.
I love that. I love that. And the cupcakes come out of the oven very fast, healthy ones, sugar-free ones.
Where did
I
those
can't
come
help it.
from?
Yeah, you come eat. You
Yeah,
need
I
to come
love
over.
that.
You need to come over. We need to be in my kitchen making like a big pot of something delicious. Food's got to
I
be
love that.
tasty. Got to be
If
tasty
I'm
and
ever
delicious.
in Wales, I'll let you know, and we
Oh
can come
man,
and
you got to come into my
cook some
kitchen.
soup.
Yeah, 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 yeah. We'll have to do like a live show eating, and we won't be talking much because there'll be a lot of eating.
I'm sure the listeners will love to listen to our chewing.
Music, a kitchen disco, and some food at the end of it. That's kind
Oh,
of
I
what
love
happens in
that.
my
Oh,
house.
yeah, I'm booking my flight. That sounds great.
Cupcakes. What could go wrong?
Yes. Yes.
That's amazing. Do you think there's anything to be said for with kind of as we're going into more developed societies, the sort of tier one countries are seeing a lot more of these kinds of phenomena around eating, disordered eating.
Hmm.
Do you think there's something to do with the fact that we have lost the ritual, or the kind of healthy, beautiful rituals around food? And I'm just thinking to my work that when I was working with so many colleagues from international colleagues from all parts of the world, Asia, Africa, Australasia, from everywhere, and everyone comes with so many beautiful rituals with around food and
Hmm.
celebration around food and making that time for eating. And as you get busier and busier and busier in our societies, that those
Yeah.
rituals die off. Do you think that's also played into this problem?
Oh, 100%. I do. I really do. It's interesting because the cultures that still honor those rituals and the even just like the slowing down around meal times and enjoying it, there is tons of literature showing that those are generally the healthier places, and that seems to be a key part of the reason why is because they do take the time to truly enjoy and feel satisfied with their meals, and it's a longer thing. It's not this like rushed process because it's harder to tune in to how you're feeling physically, and maybe you're full but you don't really realize it because you're super distracted and rushed, or you ate so fast that your stomach hasn't really had time to register that it's had enough food and then communicate that with your brain. So it's just it's so
Mm.
much.
Yeah.
I think, like, to your point of and your experience of loving to serve other people with food and enjoy the experience, like, that's, I don't ever think that should be discouraged. I think that should be encouraged because it helps you to slow down, really savor, and it's easier to stop when you've had enough and feel satisfied so that in
Mm.
an hour you're not looking for something else. So yeah, I think it's
It's yeah.
something to say for sure.
Amazing. I think maybe a kind of coming back to those rituals as well. If we can, do you help people to kind of have that family time, or even if they're on their own, to kind of make that space during the day to enjoy those meals and that kind of much healthier ritual? Uh, do you help people to come back to that?
Yeah, not directly, but more indirectly. It's, I would say, more of a side effect where people are able to now enjoy that time better and notice that it's easier to not only be present with the people that they're with, but also with themselves and honoring whatever it is that their body's requesting at the time. Um, Yeah, I mean, when we address all these like core beliefs and values and rules that we have and challenge them, then you can get to a place where you are able to have meals with others, enjoy them. It's not a big deal. And then it just kind of starts to like build on itself from there. And it's cool to see, you know, I love when I have a client that's like, I just went out to get ice cream with my daughter and I didn't stress out about it. Or
Lovely.
Binge, like I was actually able to stop after a few bites because I decided that I didn't like it anymore. Whereas before I would have finished it and I would have finished my daughter's leftovers. Then I
Yeah.
would have gone home and eaten some more. And
True
because it
story.
was more, yeah, yeah. And because it was like the mindset is different of going into that as this is an experience to enjoy with my daughter. I'm going to savor it. They were able to self regulate so much better.
So that's just so amazing, and I think we've all been there. As a mum, I've definitely
Oh,
been
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And then the kind of finishing off the children's leftovers and finishing off the
Yeah.
ice creams.
Well, sometimes you need it because you didn't have time for your own food.
I mean, that's also a true story. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's,
I've got two
that's
little
true.
kids, and sometimes I'm like, I don't have time to make my own plate and eat it because I'm doing dishes or I'm making the next meal or
I
doing
mean,
the lunchbox for tomorrow or whatever.
yeah, exactly. Some actual me time, so it would be good. Yeah,
No, yeah.
exactly. That's so interesting, and I don't know kind of where you live in the States in terms of what's around you, but are you
Yeah.
finding that your clients in term and in the work that you do are finding it difficult to get those kind of access to whole foods and easy access to nutritious, healthy, balanced foods that they can make, their food from scratch, kind of thing.
It's definitely a problem. Not so much with the clientele that I work with, but it is a huge problem in the States and I know all around the world just to
Mhm.
get access to those nourishing foods because the foods that are, and this isn't like a black and white statement. There's definitely exceptions to it, but the foods that are more shelf stable and cheaper generally are not as nutritious. Again, there's a lot of exceptions to that.
Mhm.
But when it comes to like fresh fruits and veggies and things like that, or even just like fresh meats and you know, those type of things, if you live in a certain area, sometimes they don't even have that option and they're having to get creative or they're just having to eat whatever's available because it's the only thing available and maybe
Yeah.
that's not the most nourishing and fueling thing.
Mm.
So it is a really really sad reality and something that I think as a society we get so hyper fixated on being healthy and we think that we have it all in our control and we push that on other people too. Like, you have the same 24 hours in a day that I do. You have the same options that I do. You don't have an excuse. You should be making better choices. But the truth is that some people don't have the option to make better choices because it's the only option they have, or they feel unsafe going outside. And so they're not able to go on a jog like somebody else is that lives in a well established neighborhood in a high income area. You know, like there's all of these social determinants that really do impact health outcomes and they often get missed and it's a shame, you know, it's definitely a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I've come at this, and I think with if Luke was here, would be saying the same thing. But when you start to unpick what's going on in the world, what's going on in our communities, what's going on in society, that's playing into what we know as an obesity epidemic across the world, and you start to look at it without the eye of judgment but actually understanding what's going on for
Mm-hmm.
those people, you start to have more compassion, and then you start to see actually how limiting sometimes the choices can be, even from a budget point of view, because those things
Absolutely.
aren't always cheap. The cheaper foods, the high processed foods, tend to be so much cheaper for people, and
Yeah,
so that also plays into it, and they tend to be the more addictive foods as well.
they're definitely easier to eat in excess. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You can't stop. I mean, those ones they say you once you pop, you can't stop. They made it for that, specifically for that, so that you can't stop. They made in a lab so that you can't stop. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. So you say that you have children. So has that impacted on the way that you are sort of approaching your time around food with your kids?
Oh gosh, yes, yes, but it's so hard because I do have a daughter that's a picky eater, and it's so interesting because I catch myself wanting to like force her to take bites and force her to like do all the things that I now have clients who struggle with their relationship with food because their parents said those things when they were little, you know, like you have to finish your plate or you can't have this until you've had this. And so it's like I totally get it. I totally get why parents say those things because when you see your kid and they're only eating bread and crackers and they don't eat anything else that you give them, then it's like, well, number one, that's just annoying because I took the time to make you food and you're not eating it. But number two, it's also so natural to just be concerned for them and want them to have a variety of foods. And so I've really been challenged by parenthood with how do I make sure that my kids are going to have a healthy relationship with food, even in the midst of this really difficult circumstance of my daughter being picky. Um, and that's just been like, oh, it is one of the hardest things that I've experienced as a parent. You know, generally my kids are awesome. I love them to death. This is probably one of the hardest challenges that
Yeah.
we've gone through as a family is the picky eating. And you just want to fix it right away. But I've had to remind myself, like, we've got the long-term and goal in mind. If I try to force her to do something right now so it fixes it right now, that's not necessarily fixing the underlying issue of her feeling comfortable and safe around food and excited to try new food. So I need to think more about what is the foundation that I'm setting for her and
Yeah.
make food more fun, more of a positive experience. And sometimes I just don't have the energy for that. So it gets hard.
Sound like you're doing an awesome job, by the way. I'm a
Oh, I
mother
don't
to
know
a
about that.
grandma here. Yeah, yeah. You sound like you're doing an awesome job. It is hard. It is hard when you've got some, and I've had friends that they've got a child that just eats, bread and jelly, and you call it jelly, we call
Yeah.
it jam in the UK, and it's like, oh my gosh, they won't eat anything else. They try everything. And they try
Yeah.
all the things, and it drives you mad. But you just, you get through the day. Getting through the day at the end of the day as a parent is you need like a gold medal, a congratulations,
Oh
a high
yeah.
five.
Oh yeah. Or a glass of wine, you know, like there's that emotional eating again.
Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Oh my goodness. But it's been such a pleasure speaking to you. Is there anything that we've got women across the world that will be listening to this and really I think some of what you've said has really hit home here, even for me, some of the cycles we get ourselves into.
Mhm.
And you've been so vulnerable with us and sharing your story. So thank you so much for that. I think that really makes a difference because people listen to podcasts and go, oh, well, they've got everything fixed and perfect. But actually, it's the
No.
human lived experience.
Yeah.
That was so powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I always try to make a point too because I think it is easy to be intimidated by a helping profession like a dietitian and think that, well, we're kind of people think of us as the food police, and I just want to make it clear that like I am anything but that. I am not judging you for your intake of food. Like I love all kinds of foods. I love donuts on Saturdays with my kids. Like I probably eat all the same foods you do, you know, and I've also been through the same struggles as you. So there's like we're peers, you know what I mean?
Yeah, amazing.
So yeah, it is challenging though. Our relationships with food are complex.
Yeah, very complex. But if are there any sort of last words that you wanted to share with our audience? Where can they start if they're finding themselves right now that they're like, I can't stand it anymore. I know what I'm doing to myself and it's really hurting me. I can tell, apart from weight that might be going on, weight that might be coming off, yo-yo dieting, all of
Mm-hmm.
these kinds of really almost self-punitive behaviors. Where can they start? What is the first step that they can take towards recovery and towards getting the help that they need?
Yeah, I think if you're struggling with something like overeating, it's really important that you take the time to consider why am I overeating? What is this a reflection of, or what is this a result of? Like, is it a result of I need more nourishment throughout the day, or I have some emotions that I'm kind of letting go wild, I guess, and I'm not taken the time to really deal with them properly? Or is it because there's some sort of expectation I have on myself to look a certain way? So then when I don't meet that expectation, I get upset and I throw in the towel. Like, it's so important that, back to something I said before, like that awareness piece is critical, because you don't know what you don't know. And how are you supposed to be able to fix something if you don't even know that it's an issue in the first place? So that is so key. And I actually do have a quiz. It's free that you can take if you want, all about like, why are you overeating? It's just go to yatesnutrition.com/quiz. It takes like 2 minutes. So hopefully you'll find that helpful as a starting resource to just start to dig into that category of what is going on, what could be underneath the surface of all this, because I guarantee you there is, like, it's not happening for nothing or for no reason. Even if it's mindless eating, that's still happening for reasons, because you're not thinking about it, so we can fix that. Be more mindful, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's really the first thing.
Amazing. That's really powerful, and we'll definitely make sure that we've got a link to your quiz so that people can have a look. And so this is how they can reach out to you as well. Is there like a way for them to reach out to you in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, my website is a great place to get plugged in to anything that I have and offer. You can contact me directly on there. I'm on Instagram at Yates Nutrition. I also have my own podcast, which, if you're listening to this, I know that you do like to listen to podcasts. So you can look me up. You can look up my name, or the show is called Nourished and Free. So feel free to look that up if you want to learn more about how to create a healthy relationship with food. I talk about stuff like this on there all the time: emotional eating, binging, disordered eating. I also do some fun myth busting on there. So yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I'd like you to come to my kitchen. I don't know why. I just want to cook for you.
I'm not like a chef, so I just want to be sure your expectations are, in the right
No,
place.
no, no, no. You can sit. You can have some music, and I can make
Okay.
the food. I like that.
Oh, great. Oh, yes, I'll be there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You just sit and relax, and we can just listen to some music. You can pick the playlist, and we can have some food together.
I'll make the muffins.
That's so
I like to
awesome.
bake.
Amazing. Me too. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on Sweet Liberation, Michelle. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. And I'm sure people will be reaching out. And you've been such a fountain of really powerful and impactful and vulnerable and honest information today, which is it's really refreshing and wonderful to have on our show. So thank you so, so much. And it's been a pleasure. And we hope that this won't be the last time. And maybe you can come to my kitchen and we can have a face-to-face in my kitchen with some music. What do you think about
Absolutely.
that? Amazing. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And we will catch you again next time on Sweet Liberation. Bye for now.